Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Yuzral, the game is Star Trek Online, and welcome once again to the Tribble Timewarp. It is the 10th of September 2014. There has been another patch onto Tribble. We have 2 new missions to look at and a whole host of other content, but we're going to start back with the Intrepid revamp, because they have added a few bits and pieces. Most notably, the Cochrane and Discovery, the variant hulls, now have actual... is hangar the right word? I suppose mooring's a bit better for the Aero Shuttle. Let's just see if we can get a better look at it here. Okay, yeah, so they have basically built up the saucer section to accommodate the one, and indeed to accommodate the other. So, we no longer have floaty Aero Shuttles, that is a good thing. It has also removed the Discovery's overbite on its saucer section, for want of a better term. To my mind, that actually makes it look a little bit better, but that is purely personal taste. For those who are wondering about the hull job, by the way, that's the adapted Mako set. So, back to the Cochrane for the moment, because this saucer section has acquired a little bit of a bug. As you can see, the Cochrane has got these 2 honking great impulse manifolds at the back of the saucer. You'll notice that they do not have the blue glow characteristic of the impulse outputs on the nacelles. That is because they are not producing engine trails. This strikes me as being a bit of an oversight. Apparently 2 of the biggest impulse manifolds of the class, and they're just there for looks and giggles. Punch up to full impulse, make it even more obvious. This is also true in warp, which is actually where I first noticed it. I'm assuming they're meant to be producing trails and it just got lost at some point. Much the same applies to the Discovery's slightly more modest impulse manifolds on its aft saucer array. They are also not producing engine trails. If I'd have to speculate, I'd be inclined to point to the fact that the baseline Intrepid does not have these manifolds on its aft saucer. I'm wondering whether or not that's got anything to do with it, whether the trails were simply taken out, whether there was actually a compatibility problem and the actual Intrepid model had trails where it shouldn't have had any. Anyhow, that's that. Let's move on. We have got the new Delta Alliance reputation track in-game. This is in a very, very early state, I emphasize this. We also do not as yet have a Delta Alliance mark box in the cheat station at Drozana, so we're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way by grinding out Borg disconnected. This is not actually a problem, since that's actually a really, really nice STF, at least at the moment. However, let's take a look at what we've got. So, missions are the standard types. You have your daily 20-hour grind. That requires, at present, 30 marks, 2,000 expertise, 15,000 energy credits. In fact, I think that's cheaper, isn't it? Nope, no, 15,000 is standard at 7.5 on the 1 hour. We also have the 1 hour grind, of course. Again, absolutely totally standard. 20 marks, 1,000 expertise, 7,500 energy credits for a Delta Alliance requisition, and the usual 200 Delta Alliance XP. Just for completion's sake, I've only got 29 marks, but as I say, going to be grinding time at some point. We'll just run one of these, grab a box, and see what we've got. So, yoink. Right, pop the box. Thorium-infused Polaron weapons. Thorium-infused definitely seems to be the theme for this faction. The Tier 0 gives you principally high-density, split-beam, and sniper rifles. I got a couple of sniper rifles. Usual prices, 7,500. Worth noting that I only have Mark 12 in the store at present. That may be a level function. This character is presently level 52. So we might see upgrades to Mark 13 at level 55, Mark 14 at level 60. Certainly I would hang off dilithium unless you really need to get your away team geared up for those level caps. Now then, Thoron proc is 2.5% chance on hit, as per usual, 5 seconds of 7.3 radiation damage, minus 1% crit chance and minus 15% crit severity. Interestingly, targeted placated can occur once every 15 seconds. If that sounds odd, bear in mind that you can have multiple weapons firing on the target in a given 15-second cycle. You can potentially have multiple procs occurring, so the placate has an internal cooldown. The compression bolt setting is also absolutely bog standard. Again, you have the 2.5% unstable Thoron radiation proc. There is also a quantum torpedo version flying around that I have seen listed in chat. Unfortunately, that's in a different video, so we're going to have to come back to that later. As for the rest of it, so Tier 1, Thoron-infused Polaron rifles come into the ground store. White intelligence modules. I have no idea what these are. They're not in the game as yet. As you can see, they're not in the store. We have no clue what's going on there. It should be interesting. I imagine this will tie into the captain's specialization system, so it appears as though it's not just our bridge officers who are going to be getting a sideline in sneaky stuff. Anyhow, as for the rest, we have rewards following the usual pattern. So, personal shield at level 1 along with a universal console. In this case, it's the Delta Alliance Unimatrix personal shield. 364 maximum cap, that's pretty standard. Fully regen after 3 seconds with no damage. Again, 50% drain resistance and 25% shield hardening. Or rather, 25% chance of 5% shield hardening, potentially up to 15% on 3 stacks. Worth noting, I suppose, that actually, yes, I think that is the first time we've seen shield hardening on a ground shield, at least as part of a regular proc effect. We also have the Delta Alliance set, but we shall have to see later on what those are capable of. The Bio-neuro gel pack. Now, this I think could end up causing an unholy amount of rage if people don't read it properly, because it is the standard console price, 500 marks, 2 MacGuffins, in this case the Ancient Power Cell, 15,000 dilithium, 30,000 energy credits. So, plus 2 power to all systems, 19.8 Starship shield system, that's going to be useful for anybody, 7% cooldown reduction on bridge officer abilities. Please note this does not require you to activate auxiliary to emergency battery to trigger. It is a flat reduction across all bridge officers as far as I can tell. I haven't actually had an opportunity to yank one out, stuff it in a slot and take it for a ride. And oh wow, that sounded wrong if you're in a suitably dirty mood. As I say, I can see this causing a lot of rage, and particularly among the anti-AUX to battery crowd, but bear in mind it applies to everybody. It's a flat reduction, so it's like any console. It's a very powerful upgrade, and yes, AUX to bat are going to get a lot of advantage out of it, but we'll have to see how it stacks up, because 7% cooldown reduction, if that's working off maximum cooldown, then it's effectively an extra technician. If it's working off cooldown remaining, then it becomes significantly less powerful, because it will take its hit, it will remove the 7%, and then AUX to bat will have to tie in. And actually, that was just talking rubbish. It's going to trigger automatically when any bridge officer ability cools down, unless there's something we haven't missed. So it's always going to be all bridge officers at 93% cooldown. However, that we'll have to get it into space, see what it does. As far as traits go, on Tier 1 we have the usual ground traits. Armor penetration, 15% penetration to, well, armor, and a rather handy physical conditioning, 5% run speed. I'm assuming that applies in all circumstances. Bear in mind that it is run speed and not sprint speed. So, once again, get it on the ground, see what it does. Tier 2, 15,000 rep, we get the Tier 2 passives. We also get Thoron-infused assault weapons, so shotguns, miniguns, etc. In fact, we've got one here. The Pulse Wave Assault version, that dropped out of a random box, as well as green intelligence modules, the deflector array, and the neutronic torpedo launcher. We're going to have to wait and see what that does. As I say, Delta Alliance stuff is not as yet in the testing station on Drozana. Bit of a pain. Compression phaser rifle, compression disruptor rifle. If those don't involve a nod to Voyager's aesthetics, I will be slightly disappointed. Science, engineering, and tactical kits. Neutronic grenades and mortars sound like fun. Neutronic radiation, we're going to have to see what that does. The mortars and the grenades are fairly obvious. I got a little bit disappointed by the Sonic Pulse with the Counter Command Rep, because that was a point-blank AoE. We'll see if that's targeted or, well, it could be funny. We also have the hyper-efficient engines, so, could we be looking at an escort set or a science set? It's been a while since I had one. The Counter Command, of course, was Battlecruiser. Mako and Omega are more general purpose, as are Honor Guards. So, traits give us reactive healing accelerator on the ground. Oh wait, no, that's tier 3. We're looking at tier 2. Tier 2 traits. Yep, let's get back to here. 34.5% flight speed, 25% flight rate. That is good, but it's not quite on the par of a fleet RCS console, quite candidly. 34.5% flight speed could be interesting. I can see that causing a certain amount of rage in the PvP crowd, because the gun and run full impulse and evasive maneuvers brigade, I think we're setting several speed records. Actually, speaking of speed records, take that trait, hook it onto the Bluebird, and ramp it up. Let's see if we can break 1,000 impulse at some stage. That's something else to add to the bucket list. Anyhow, 15% armor penetration on ships. Going to be interesting to see how that works. If it's simply 15% of all damage goes through resistances regardless, then that's going to be quite powerful against things like the crystalline entity and aceton weapons. However, if it's simply a damage resistance reduction, and I suspect that's how it's going to be implemented, then we'll see. We'll see. Anyhow, reactive healing accelerator on the ground in tier 3. I'm guessing that is a triggered ability. On crit, triggers self-heal. Now, let's get down to the ground for a second, because the numbers are set for space as things stand. That's why it's saying close to 7,000 hit points. So let's just beam down. Dock. And dock. And, oh, I've just crashed. Okay, fine. Submit the cryptic error report, 32987988. Docking at ESD on Tribble in long-range science vessel retrofit stroke Mako. So, no, that's the adapted Mako XII set. Especially if you're on Tribble, boys and girls, if you do get a crash to desktop and you get the cryptic error bug, always fill it out. In this case, ticket ID 32987988. Fill it out, report it. The more bugs they get, the more info they get, the more they can squash. So, one little bit of a crash later, we are back on Earth's space dock. Right, continuing onwards. Tier 2 reputations. Oh wait, no, we've done those. So, Tier 3. Reactive Healing Accelerator. 116.6 hit points over 5 seconds. That's a little more reasonable for a ground heal. Nice little option. On crit. Critical what, you have to ask, because that could be a critical hit done to me, critical hit done by me to someone else, critical heal likewise in either direction. I suspect reactive. Makes me think it's an incoming critical hit to the player, but who knows? We'll find out once we get a closer look at the trait and once we can get it onto the ground. Rending shots is another curious one. Now, firing ground weapons increases crit chance. Grants rending shots to self 5% critical chance for 20 seconds. To self removes up to 100 effects. So that makes me think that this could be a triggered ability that will give you a stacking crit chance, or just 5% crit chance, 20 seconds, but then you get the reload as essentially a cooldown, which removes up to 100 effects, presumably up to 100 versions of the rending shots buff. I hope to Lord that that is not going to be 100 stacks of rending shots, because 500% critical hit chance for 20 seconds? No. No. I'm missing something there, and it'll be interesting to see how that develops on Tribble. So, moving on to Tier 3, Actually, yes, staying on Tier 3 for a bit. Tier 3 passibilities we've just covered. New store unlocks. Thorn-infused quantum torpedoes and mines. Blue intelligence modules. Incidentally, the Thorn-infused quantum projectiles, same proc, but a 33% chance to make up for the lower fire rate. Set items. You get the compression phaser and disruptor rifles, as well as the hyper-efficient engines, and some new kit modules. Neutronic mortars and grenades sound fairly self-explanatory. Neutronic radiation we're going to have a look at as and when I can get up to Tier 3. Unfortunately, the cheat items are not on Drozana Station at the moment. They'll come in a later build, I hope, or we're going to be doing a lot of grinding on Borg Disconnected. Actually, I'm probably going to be doing a lot of grinding on Borg Disconnected anyway, because it's a really nice mission. However, Moving on, Tier 4, passive abilities. We have got a space reactive repairs. Again, numbers are wonky because we're on the ground, not in space. And again, much like the ground version, I have a suspicion that that is going to be triggered on incoming critical damage. I sincerely hope so, because there's quite a lot of it flying around in Borg Disconnected. Enhanced rending shots. Again, not quite sure how this is going to work, but 1.5% critical chance of space, that's gonna be fun in space. I can see the Romulans in particular loving that one. However, Tier 4 goodies. We have got Thoron-infused Polaron beam and cannon weapons, the purple intelligence modules, and a trajector warp and singularity cores. Again, not a clue. We're going to have to get up there and find out. Advanced Thoron-infused beam array and advanced dual heavy cannon as the finish up of the ordnance set. Finally, of course, Tier 5, single active ability, the concussive tachyon emission. Again, not sure whether this is going to be ground or space. I would like to think... Actually, I don't know what I'd like to think. I mean, it would work nicely in either of them. But shields temporarily disabled in space sounds like a very, very powerful proc, and it's going to make a big difference in Borg Disconnected in the final phase. If you haven't seen that, well, keep an eye out, because I'm going to be doing a a Twitch stream, and I will be advertising it on Twitter. Why does everything have to start with TW? Anyhow, I'll do a quick primer video on that. I'll do a live stream this weekend some point. I'll put details out on at Ursula, and I'll also mention it when I put the primer video out later on this week. Anyhow, shields offline for 8 seconds, and some nice little wash of kinetic damage despite it being a tachyon emission. Of course, tachyons just refer to it taking the shields out of action. You also get the shield on both the ground and space sets. Again, no cheat on Drazana at the moment, so we're going to have to wait and see what those bring. Another little bug that just caught my eye while I was mucking around in the crafting system. Those of you who've been watching the Tribble Timewarp regularly through Delta Rising will be aware that we are getting a new type of crafting recipe, specifically the ability to make the upgrade kits. Now, beams drop down, we have got the basic tech upgrade for beam technology. Pull this open. You can see that it requires 2,500 energy credits, pocket change, a targeting interface, and I am missing the focusing lens. So normally you could just left click on this and it would take you to the construction options for the focusing lens. What actually happens if you left click is that you get the construction page for an emitter module instead. Very handy, because that actually is required for the medium tech upgrade. Doesn't really help with the basic tech upgrade. However, that does seem to be something that didn't quite get set up correctly. But since we're here, we'll just pop in the collector's on. I also know it's still taking its time to finish up crafting missions for some reason, along with duty officer missions. Again, as you can see, it's not a glitch. It's produced the emitter array. We're still missing the focusing lens. Happy, happy, joy, joy. However, you actually need it for the improved tech upgrade. So yoink and yoink. Right, get that going. Actually, while we're here, let's take a look at cannons. Okay, so you need level 5 to do those. Can't do it just yet. Down to basic research projects, tech upgrades for engineering tech. That's fine. Cancel that. An option to go back up to the parent project would be nice as well, but I'm not sure how you'd make that work. And quickly double check lab equipment. Yeah, it just seems to be an error on that one project, which is a little bit of a pain, but there you go. So that pretty much wraps up that. We have, of course, got 2 new missions to look at, so cue the spoilers, boys and girls, but I'll break that off into another episode. Until then, farewell.